And so you get these two dimensions of life from his autobiography. The outer dimension, what he calls personality number one, the social personality, the person we are with other people and in our time and in our society and in our families and so on. And then there's another personality, personality number two, which is much older, which is much wiser in some ways, which is much closer to our bodies and to our instincts and to our, what he would eventually call our archetypal makeup. A much older figure. And putting these two together in his autobiography, I found absolutely fascinating and engaging. And I guess that's what I've been trying to do myself ever since, and helping other people to do. Put together these two sides of their lives, the conscious side, their conscious memories, and the unconscious side, their dreams, their fantasies, their imagination. And trying to integrate the personality through that kind of work, which is really what Jungian psychotherapy is all about. In the more normal instances that we all participate in, we can dialogue with those figures. They are like other points of view that we can get in touch with. If you do active imagination, for instance, as you can read Jung's graphic account of it in the Red Book, but you can do it yourself, and you're successful at getting somewhere with it, which means that you actually have an experience that there is another voice in you, or another point of view, or a figure who doesn't see things exactly the way you do, or that extends your perspective out and you can go and look through their eyes for a little bit, or talk to them. You do get this feeling that that you are made up of a complexity of inner figures. So we speak sometimes of a shadow figure. This might be represented in a dream as a nasty person, an enemy, somebody you dislike, a neighbor, or somebody you don't even know, who's threatening you and has horrible traits and qualities. And if you take that on a subjective level, as we say, in the interpretation of dreams, interpret it subjectively, and you say, well, this is a part of myself. It's a part of my own psyche. Maybe I can project this onto somebody else, but why don't I just take it as part of myself and see where I can go with it? And you enter into a dialogue with it, and have a conversation with it. What you'll find, usually, is that if you start paying attention to it and showing interest in it, it will start changing, and it will start coming towards you. And this is a part of integration, that you can close the distance, in a way, while still maintaining some separateness and some difference. But the figures can become a part of your personality and your everyday functioning. And it can, if you have them available and you aren't too dissociated from them, you can step out of your ego and look at the world from their point of view. How does the shadow figure look at things? Or how does the anima look at things, or the animas? And it's a little bit also like working with your typology, your thinking type. What is your feeling function doing? Ask your feeling function. It's not so easy. Or one of your less developed functions. How does your sensate function look at the painting? How does your thinking function think about it? These are also parts or aspects. If they are very alien from your ego state, we could say that they are dissociated. And if they are actually represented by figures that you can't get in touch with, but come out spontaneously from time to time in emotional ways, when you're having a strong emotional reaction, you start shouting, throwing things, when normally you're a kind of quiet, calm person. We say you're possessed by your other personality, your complex. You're caught in the complex. And that isn't so bad necessarily, to let yourself go with the complex and then step back and reflect on it and say, wow, it's interesting what that person said. it's not exactly what I think, but I should maybe take that into account and listen to that, see what that point of view is. Because there's something there that I'm not in touch with normally. What we mean by shadow integration and connecting with the shadow is, and integrating or holding the shadow and recognizing the shadow, is to find those parts of ourselves, or find in ourselves those very features that we can identify in people that we dislike, that we hate, that we fear, that we think are terrible, are destructive towards us, are envious of us, so on and so forth. If we can find in ourselves those very qualities that we see in the other, we might see the other a little more clearly, because they probably aren't as one-sidedly bad as we see them either. Reality is always a little more complex than what we see when we're in a strong projection, whether it's shadow or anima or anything else. When we're in the projection, we see only what we are putting out there pretty much. And we can project also parental figures. That's the classic instance of projecting in the transference, that we project a parent figure. And that can be a positive parent, can be a negative parent. You can have had a terrible mother, and you go into analysis and you experience your analyst as horrible and frightening and threatening, and somebody you hate even. And that can be a very important experience of the negative mother, in order to redeem that part of yourself and find that part of yourself and overcome that part of yourself and get through that trauma and find out that the other person isn't really like that. And the complexity of the object, holding the object, the other, in a respectful way, whether it's positive or negative, is really a very advanced stage of maturation and individuation. So that if you have a very negative mother experience and you're around her and you are still caught in it, you can hardly bear to hear her voice or be with her. If you work on that and you get through it a bit, and you can integrate pieces of it, even to the point maybe of understanding, forgiving, seeing another side, you'll have a surprising discovery that when you're with her, she doesn't bother you quite as much. You aren't putting into her your old experiences. You're seeing her in the present more, and you're seeing her also as a suffering human being. Maybe somebody who did her best and couldn't do any better when you were little and she was young, and who knows what was going on. So this is the importance of taking back the projections, reclaiming the soul. And to reclaim the anima, or the animus, is such a big work and such an important work, but it's also where our creativity lies, and so that we don't put it out there into somebody else and chase after it. What we see in the other is a part of ourselves. That's the thing to remember. And how can we live that? How can we do something good for ourselves with it? But he really enters another phase of his life, and another phase of analytical psychology is beginning to bloom. The field is beginning to grow, in the sense that after the First World War, students from abroad started coming to study with Jung. And these became a very important set of figures that would carry the field further and carry it far, far afield into distant lands and other countries. And so students came from England, they came from France, they came from Germany, they came from the United States. And they formed what we could call the second generation. The second generation of analytical psychologists, Jungian analysts, came to Zurich in the 1920s and the 1930s, and they studied with Jung. Many of them were in analysis with Jung. And if not with Jung, then with Emma Jung or with Tony Wolff. And in those days, there were no training institutes. So if you wanted to become a Jungian analyst, there was no such persona identity in the world at that time. But if you wanted to practice as a psychotherapist using the methods of Carl Jung of Zurich, you had to come to Zurich. You had to work with Jung or one of his close colleagues here for a period of time. And once he got to know you and could vouch for you and trust your work, he would give you a letter. And you could put that on your wall, and the letter would say that you were qualified to practice in the method of C.G. Jung. And so there are a number of these letters floating around the world, but they were given to the second generation. It had international visibility, it had training programs in place, and when Jung died in 1961 on June 6th, I think he could die with the feeling that his work would continue, carried on by the generation that he had trained and that now was training further generations. I consider myself of the fourth generation. You establish your generation by looking at your analyst and then finding out who his or her analyst was, and so on back till you get to Jung. So my analyst was someone who was in analysis with a second generation who was in analysis with Jung on fourth generation.